Thank you. Well, hello again, and we have been talking about vulnerability and discrimination for more than 3.5 hours now. So, talk again about this is probably to maybe expand or maybe not what Daryl has mentioned all this morning about things that matter regarding vulnerability and discrimination. I can get some of his words and say that all of us are vulnerable, and all of us get along with other people that are vulnerable. And well, we have to live with that, as Darren mentioned in the last words. He said, it's not possible to change everything. We can try to do that. But what I want to do, and probably not in the time I had, because it's less time that remains, but to really pinpoint the base of this. And that's why I said this as vulnerability principles and values. And really there are human principles and values. And as Geraldine was mentioning, she's not there anymore, but as she was mentioning, we are different, we are quite different. And because we're different, we think different, and we act different. And probably that is what we should start with. And for that, principles and values are really, or get really into ourselves in the beginning of our life. And as I have mentioned before, now there are prenatal psychologists that tell us that when we were inside the womb of our mother, we were receiving and we were getting that base, preparing that way of react, of judge, and of act ourselves. And some other people say that probably we get all those bases or foundations of our morality, our way of acting, up to probably 3 or 3.5 years of age. So that was the time we allowed in our mind, body, and spirit and everything to get what we use now to reflect and to act with others. So probably that is part of that vulnerability in one aspect, but that's part of the treat we have with the vulnerability of others. And well, we have to live with that, as Daryl mentioned. And well, there are some readings that I made that explain part of this. And for instance, 1998 in Copenhagen, Rendorf mentioned that there were basic principles regarding diversity and vulnerability. And those basic principles were those that are in the screen: autonomy, dignity, integrity, of course, vulnerability, and all that in the framework of solidarity and responsibility. And For that, he mentioned an objective. The objective of his work was to elaborate on these philosophical and conceptual frameworks about these principles, and to start with a discussion of how to choose these principles in the context of law and ethics, and what's the difference and what's the connection between all of these four principles plus the framework, and between ethics and law. And really, he said that it's important to emphasize that these principles, rather than being mutually exclusive, as some of them are taken by, and we mentioned that yesterday, by the Western world regarding as there is one that is more important than the other. And Daryl, of course, mentioned that yesterday, that they should be equal and that they should be connected. And that's the idea of this, that these principles should pinpoint our reflection and our action, but in an equal level of importance. There is none that is over the others, and they should be used together to pinpoint what we want to do, what we want to reflect, what we want to act with others. And in part, this is part of our vulnerability, and that's the way we can go and pinpoint the vulnerability of others and how we can help them, the others, to help us with our vulnerability. And that's probably the center of this presentation regarding values and principles, regarding this diversity and these vulnerable areas of our human.
Ayudar a ellos para que nos ayuden, no entendí.
That's the way I put it. That's the way we can help them to help us. Yes. So, but why these principles? Why not others? Or why these are more important? Because if you notice in these principles, they are the foundation of that protection need, of that protection that we have to give and that we need others to give us in order to survive, in order to what Geraldine mentioned before, to be ourselves, to be me, to be you, and to get together. And in fact, I'm not going to repeat what the whole morning we have mentioned about these ways of connecting cultures and of trying to behave as much as we are, but to be responsible of a respect of what others are. And that's probably the key point of this. And to that, we have to concrete that reality, as is mentioned, and they should be interpreted as expressions of this ethical understanding of us as human persons in our daily life, in our daily acts or actions with others. And well, we can, and I'm going to do it quickly. We can get each one of these 4 principles, and we can start with this, that probably worldwide is the most named principle in bioethics, and sometimes it's taken as the only one that means something, because it's our auto-determination of ourselves and our acts. And of course, it is very important, and it's very important because we have freedom, but we need to have responsibility of that freedom. And of course, we're free of thinking and of reflecting and to act as we want. But we have to be responsible with others. And if we want to be responsible with others regarding our autonomy, is that we have to use the other principles equally, and not thinking only of what I deserve, but what, again, what I can get from others that respect me. And of course, this is through actions, and autonomic or autonomous actions are these that are there: freedom, responsibility, of course, authenticity, deliberation, moral reflection, decision. And we have to go through all this regarding this principle in order to act, to make actions. And that's one, but the other one is dignity. And yesterday we talked a lot, well, Daryl talked about a lot about dignity. And dignity without autonomy, or autonomy without dignity, cannot be think of, cannot be put in the side of what we want to get for our vulnerability and what we want to give for the vulnerability of others. And of course, human dignity, Daryl mentioned it yesterday, with those 2 aspects: the ontogenic aspect, the one that all people have the same dignity, and then the other dignity, the one that we build with our actions, the morality, and put it that way. And that dignity, we can increase it or decrease it regarding what we do. Nobody can get that out of us, but we are the ones that do a better morality or lower morality regarding our actions. And that's why it says there that this characteristic is choosing between good and evil. And choosing between good and evil is part of this reflection that we have to do with our own principles and values, and respecting principles and values of the other people we act with or we act upon them. So that's part of this concept, this cosmovision we can say about this reflection and action about vulnerability of others and of ourselves. But we have to add integrity also. And integrity means that we need to think of us and of others about these four aspects of humanity, of our physical, biological aspect, of our psychological or emotional aspect, of our relational or sociological aspect, and of our spiritual or transcendent aspect in our humanity. And to get this with the other two principles we have mentioned, dignity and autonomy, or responsible autonomy, means that we need to put this in an equal position with the other two, dignity and autonomy. We cannot think of autonomy without thinking in dignity and integrity, and being more in the formulation of these ethical but also legal aspects of our behavior. And talking about integrity, we need to expand our vision, our concept of integrity, because we need to put that in the level of social, economical, legal aspects besides the ethical aspects regarding this integration of a human being that we are and the others also are. And here there are a lot of examples. I don't have the time to go over them, but really protection of information, and yesterday also we talked about this information, confidentiality, privacy. Those are part of these social demands that people have, and we also have as people, to protect, and to protect individually, and to protect for the others, or protect the others too. And finally, this vulnerability principle. And this is a part or an expression of our condition, our human condition. And is not only a descriptive term about what I lack or what I need to be more complete, more total, but also to think about the others and how I can get what they need in order of not feeling vulnerable. And here again, ethics and law are fundamental to connect this other principle. And we can put it as a moral imperative. Levinas is a Lithuanian philosopher that lived for many years in France, defined this concept of vulnerability as the basis, as the foundation of the understanding of our human condition. And he also mentioned that it was the foundation for our morality. And the morality, he says, is a compensation of our vulnerability. So we have to work and to live with this, trying to integrate what we lack or what is our vulnerability and what we act, so what is our morality, and to face these two things and get an answer, but not just for us. And Levinas is the philosopher that mentioned that thing that Eugenio was questioning about. That we need to complete the other so the other can complete us. And that's part of Levinas's philosophy. So we need to think first in the other and then ask the other to think about us. So that's probably what we need regarding vulnerability, what we need as the human action, to try to be balanced in this asymmetrical imbalance between weakness and powerful, and the engagement, the ethical engagement that can produce in us the willingness to help the weak in order of them being more powerful to help us with our weaknesses. And that's vulnerability, for at least for Levinas. That's part of this continued effort that we have to have in order to recognize vulnerability in the others and to ask them to recognize our vulnerability. So that's part of this exercise with principles and values. Vulnerability, as is mentioned, is the foundation for these ethical notions of care, responsibility, empathy with the other. It also motivates ethical concern for this fragility of human condition. But also is the task of this, the settlement of these legal principles and rules and concrete rules to protect vulnerability of all human beings, in order to understand vulnerability of others, and again, others understanding our vulnerability and trying to connect in order to stress that power that we need to feel not vulnerable or to feel less vulnerable. So that's part of this interconnection of principles, and also of putting these four principles in the framework of solidarity. And solidarity and also responsibility, as I mentioned in the first principle that we coach, the autonomy. This is part of that effort to take care of the weak, the poor, the sick, the vulnerable in society. And of course, Godin in 1985 mentioned that these moral agents, we are moral agents, acquire special responsibilities to protect the interests of others, to the extent that those others are especially vulnerable or in some way dependent on their choices and actions. So that's probably what we need to understand and to live with in order to have these other approaches. One of the references of vulnerability is to what? Persons or things are vulnerable? Where do their weaknesses lie? What mechanisms are capable of inflicting harm on them? And the other one is to whom? Persons or things? Or vulnerable? Who can inflict harms on me who can protect me against them, those harms. So regarding that, there are lots of vulnerable groups. The first thing I mentioned is that we all are vulnerable. So probably we are in one of those groups or in others that are not here. Children, elderly, disabled, those we identified quite quickly. Women, religious, ethnic minorities, sexual minorities. When we got to the last ones, we start thinking well, we are not part of that. But really, what we are part of is to find out what the vulnerable point is. Daryl mentioned at the end of this talk this morning, just a few minutes ago, something regarding, we were talking about fertility and infertility and all that, regarding the problems of gender identification, of transgender, or, well, he didn't mention the word, but transsexualism, or intersex. And I have been able to study a little bit about that for a lecture they asked me to give. And maybe we can understand better this type of things, to understand better these vulnerable human beings, trying to understand that probably there is something in the back, something in the origin of this person, something in the way they were, and Darren mentioned that, they were assigned regarding sex when they were born at birth, and probably that was not the exact assignation they required. And thinking on that, we have sex assignations or gender assignations that are totally wrong, and that probably a boy was assigned and really is a girl, or a girl is assigned and really is a boy. And well, there were mistakes. They were wrong in that position because probably they were with the effect of hormones or with the effect of some genetic traits that put them in that position. And well, he asked us, we didn't answer, but he asked us at what time they have to decide. At what time they have to know that, for instance, they are not men, they are women, or they are not women, they are men. And society have chosen that before. And for society, it's very difficult to go along that change in sex. But their phenotypic sex is not their genotypic sex. And they are not quite acquainted with that. They realize that they are not in what they want to be. And probably we think that they have psychological problems. And we mention them as vulnerable, psychiatrically vulnerable, for instance, and that they are nuts, that they don't know what they want, and that they probably want to do something else. But really, what was their origin? What was the problem in the first place? So that's one of the examples, I'm not going to, we have another one because we are getting at the end of the time, but how bioethics can help with all these vulnerable positions, to help us, everyone. And well, first, to find out what makes vulnerable, what makes us vulnerable, or others vulnerable, or our communities or groups vulnerable. And then to ask if bioethics, and we are very interested in bioethics, help us concerning this vulnerability. And of course, we need to find out what are the answers for us. And really, when we think of a simple answer, maybe we can use the word exploitation, or that is morally wrong. But really, it's exploitation, or we have a wrong morality. What is exploitation? Well, exploitation, of course, when wealthy and powerful individuals or agencies take advantage of the poor, the underserved, the dependent, and use them as serving their own interests without compensating with services or benefits. Or probably we can think about weakness or maybe difference. We have talked about that we are really different. But is that really the answer? The people who oppress or harm the real vulnerable, perhaps even accidentally, are typically vilified and become social outcasts. But really, is that the answer for them?
Very tough. This is not a group, this is junk.
Oh, okay.
You can read the comments. Okay, so we had this strange junk coil. Okay, we're watching your comments and your pictures on Skype, but you please go back. Sorry, we had a spam on the Skype, which is a problem.
Doctor, at the end of the day, everybody, all of us has vulnerability, right?
Yes.
All of us.
That's right. Yes.
This is reaction.
Uh-huh.
We were just here in our community, in Mexico, culturally speaking, the victim is a key role on the community.
Uh-huh.
Because someone who is a victim of someone else or something else gets something. So many people, they feel very comfortable playing that role as a victim. And you can see every day, anytime, anyone in such a case, such a circumstance.
Well, yeah. They think they are
And
morally
they're
right.
vulnerable as well.
Yes, they think they are morally right, and that they can go along with that, and nobody is going to hurt them. But they are exploiting others, and probably they are exploiting the entire society. And in the example you are giving, I'm not going to be more deep in that. But really, we have to put that in the concept of these principles I mentioned, and that we have to think that, of course, not all human beings have the same morality, and that's part of our values and principles. And but we need to set what we need for that and what we can do to overcome that. Daryl mentioned that it's almost impossible to make all good and to live harm and bad things in the past and not having them anymore. It's just impossible. But we can do something, as he mentioned before, to compromise others in the way of making things better. That's probably what we can do with our vulnerability, because as you mentioned, all of us are vulnerable regarding those actions. And well, all of us, but not them, at least in the real sense of the word, for them. But really, this is situational, as is mentioned here. So in this situation, in this time, they are like that. And they think they are doing good. They are exploiting people, as I mentioned it before, that they are being served by those people, and they are not acting as serving also those people. So the problem here is, how do we react to that vulnerability of our vulnerability regarding those actions, and how we can go along with this in order to change as much as we can that vulnerability. And for the ones that are not here and are not Mexicans, we're talking about corruption.
We have to overcome our own vulnerability.
Yes, sure.
To go ahead and comply with this.
Yes. So that's part of this. And just to finish, and I round off with this, we have actions that can be relational, or this that I was explaining, we can get together and try to do things interacting directly and trying not to harm the others, and the others trying not to harm us, and we can make a common ground to interact with these other people that are making that harm to all of us. Or situational. And situational is that when we stand as ourselves with the vulnerable person and assist them in their vulnerability. But again, thinking of the way they later on can assist us with our vulnerability. So that's part of this interaction. We are all vulnerable. We need to do something about that vulnerability, but we have to do something about the vulnerability of others in order of those others to help us with our vulnerability. Other questions or comments?
Thank you very much for your
Yes.
inspiring talk. May I ask you about the concept of dignity and also the meaning of dignity or human dignity? In your opinion, is it the dignity, is it many people say it's an inherent dignity, it's an intrinsic value.
Yes. Well, the philosophers call it ontogenic dignity. If you are a human being, you have an equal dignity to every other human being. And then the philosophers mention this other type of dignity. They call it, I don't know, how is it in English? Dignity? The moral dignity. So the dignity that we have as a result of our actions. And that's the moral dignity, and the first one is the ontogenic or basic, or dignity by origin. And this moral dignity is the one that we built regarding our actions in our history. So we can increase that dignity, and we can decrease that dignity, but we cannot qualify our dignity, our moral dignity. It has to be qualified by others, and it has to be qualified by those others that receive our actions, the effect of our actions. So they can qualify if we increase or decrease that morality, that dignity of morality or moral dignity. That's the difference. Does that answer you?
Because I always find difficulty in understanding this concept, because in my culture or traditional view, people's view toward dignity, in my culture, dignity is seen as something not necessarily inherent or intrinsic value, but as dignity is considered as something people attain by certain practice or.
But that's a moral dignity.
Is it?
And it's not practice. Well, it's practice because it's my actions that are building that dignity. Building it in the upright position or in the downright position, but building it.
Can I say that on one hand we have human dignity, which is objective quality that we should all respect. But on the other hand, we have this kind of sense of realized sense of dignity, we subjectively like to attain or so
How do you balance that?
So to me, yes, how to balance that.
Well, I don't know if it has a balance, or you can add one to the other. I know that they are different, but what do you think, Larry?
I think well, as we've seen in this discussion going into what is dignity, one word can mean many things. Love means many things. Dignity, slightly less number of things, but still it's implicit, has different things, as you said. So moral dignity, you mentioned, was something we gain over time. For example, the moral dignity of the picture we saw earlier of the Kenyan runner giving the water to the Chinese disabled runner. She gained moral dignity because she did an action of love. Some very old people or some young people lose their moral dignity when they become corrupt, for example. Even take the case of victimization, where our colleagues just left, but victimization, mentioned victims. So many victims exploit the system by trying to get, saying, I'm very sorry and poor, please give me money. I think, let's say I'm begging for water, begging for money. for me, a beggar loses a dignity because of begging. It actually, if they just are very stoic and don't ask for it, they haven't lost their dignity. They've retained their dignity. But another form of dignity, because they're very poor and they might, have no water and very tough, some aspects of their dignity, like wearing suit and tie, is lost by begging. But because they didn't beg, they've kept some dignity, some sense of psychological dignity by not asking others. But in terms of bioethics, having relationships to sometimes ask may not be losing your dignity. The dignity, there's several examples. So for me, a person who comes and asks me for money has lost some sense of dignity by begging. Because in my culture, and I spent a long time in Japan, to beg is not a good thing. Whereas if I'm in a culture where begging is not, so same if I go to India, south of Nepal, especially in India, south of Nepal, many people, if they do something, will ask you for money. And for me, they've lost dignity. But for their culture, they may not have lost dignity. It may just be, if they help you, they expect some money. But for me, it's very wrong to ask for money. If I help you, if I'm walking lost in the city and somebody comes and guides me and takes me to a place, an exam I've lost, thank you very much. And but once they ask for money, they've lost all dignity in my sense, because it's not my culture.
I think it's the monks that they donated.
Again, this is an interesting thing. Buddhist monks to get food from people. Yeah, and so our colleague from Thailand has left the conversation that every good Buddhist day, which is usually once or twice a week, is a good day. She goes and gives food to the monk because it's a Buddhist day, and she gets merit for a good karma by giving food to the monk. But for me, because I respect her choice and I'm happy that she does that and prays for me giving food to the monk, it's okay. She may pray for all of us, and thanks a lot, that's good. But on the other hand, for me, I wouldn't like to beg for food. But if I'm a monk and people come and give me food and that's my life, then I understand that's maybe the culture. The same giving money to the church. Yeah. So it's sort of the same thing. If I give a donation in the offering of the church, because I am feeling happy to donate to the church, and then should the priest accept the money? So maybe if they give to the poor, that's good, but a lot of the church buildings are very beautiful and lots of gold and lavish, so some people say that's dignified building to worship God, but on the other hand, so everyone's different. What do you think?
Yes, I agree with you.
It's sort of a different concept.
Yes.
And if I go to a church, I want to go maybe to a place of worship that is beautiful, but I've been receiving from some poor people who gave a lot of money, and maybe they shouldn't have taken money.
But again, probably what I can say is those actions probably are referred to what I think is vulnerable, so I do something for the vulnerable. And in fact, the other thing is what those vulnerable people can do for me. In your example with the monks and this girl or lady, maybe she's giving them because they need the food, and she is expecting by her prayers and all that to have some help from them in her vulnerable position. Maybe, as you mentioned later, sometimes we make mistakes and we give money or food to non-vulnerable people regarding food or money, and they are not going to use that food or money for the good purposes. Maybe.
So, any other comments?
See if I
I just want to mention something. When we started talking about this issue, we're talking about cosmobiology. And one important thing is about making difference between when we're talking about the right of the humans. This is part of the cosmobiology. No, it's all cosmobiology. And the other thing is about the human being. When we're talking about dignity, integrity, something like that. By remember, we are together, all the part of living on the planet. And also we're talking about the ethnic things when we're talking about animals, plants, and environmentals. Don't forget about what are our rights like a human. And we are about the human relations, how much to something.
So, in fact, when we give love to vulnerable beings, this is good for the relationships between the society. Your talk also reminded me of vulnerable species, endangered species, which we actually have laws to protect in some environments, with a broader, so the biological species which are endangered. And in fact, in the book, The Bioethics is the Love of Life, the book that I may show tomorrow or next day, it is, for me, the most purest form of love is trans-species love. Because a trans-species good act is not for the selfish gene survival of my species. It's for the good. So, for example, a dolphin who saves a dog. Dolphins do save dogs. Dolphins also save human beings. But a dolphin saving a dog from drowning is an extremely interesting moral act. And there are various accounts of dolphins saving dogs. So you could imagine a dolphin saving a human is very clever and thinking, well, if I'm good to humans, they're going to try and stop hunting me. But a dolphin saving a dog, it's of no survival advantage for dolphins. But so that's an example. Of course, you can say dolphin saving human beings is a very good act as well. When I save the species that is endangered, it's a good act. When I save my dear professor, he's not another being, it's nice, but it's not as morally significant as saving another species in terms of one form of ethics. Yeah. And so, of course, different people have different forms.
Yes.
But helping vulnerable people has also, that aspect has been highlighted in many religions as an act of merit of something that we are meant to do. So I think that's also a good discussion. Yep, some people are very tired. So thank you for joining by Skype as well to our friends. And I'm very happy they could finally see your video. When the number is lower, they can see it.
Y están diciendo buenas noches, imagínense qué horas son. I'm saying they're saying good night, so imagine what's their time. What's the time frame over there? Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tiempo para comer.
Yes. Okay. Tenemos, empezamos a las 3 nuevamente. Aquí los esperamos, pueden pasar a la cafetería para que tengan sus alimentos.